The $40 billion voice podcast economy. Alright, let's jump right in. What started out as this kind of niche hobby, people talking into microphones in their closets, has absolutely exploded. It's become this massive global economic force. So today we are going to deconstruct how this industry got so ridiculously big, who's actually listening, and where all the money is really going. So to really get a sense of the scale here, let's just start with a number. By 2025, the global podcasting market is projected to be worth almost $40 billion. Let that sink in. This isn't just a hobby anymore. It's a full-blown mainstream global industry. So how in the world did we get here? That's really the big question for our explainer today. How did simple audio conversations morph into this complex economy of creators, giant platforms, and advertisers all fighting for a piece of the action? First up, let's talk about the podcast gold rush. We are going to look at the sheer scale of content creation and, well, the pretty harsh reality that a lot of creators face when they decide to jump in. The podcasting universe is vast. I mean, according to Podcast Index, there are over 4.5 million real podcasts out there. That is a global library of voices talking about literally every topic you can imagine, from true crime to quantum physics. But, and this is a huge, but here's the reality check behind that massive number. A staggering 44% of all podcasts just stop after only 3 episodes. It's a phenomenon called pod fading, and it really shows you how incredibly tough it is to stay consistent in such a crowded market. Even with all those individual challenges, though, the financial trajectory for the industry as a whole is just mind-blowing. We are looking at a market that's projected to more than triple, hitting over $131 billion by 2030. So for the creators who can stick with it, the pie is getting a whole lot bigger, and it's getting bigger fast. Okay, so who's actually powering this whole economy? Let's meet the modern listener, because when you look at the data, you start to see a fascinating picture of a very, very valuable audience. In the US, it's pretty clear a majority of people under 55 are now monthly listeners, and yeah, younger audiences are the core, but you can see there's serious adoption across every age group. It is definitely not just a young person's game anymore. In fact, and you might not expect this, the fastest growing segment of all is listeners who are 55 and older. This really shows how the medium's appeal is broadening, breaking all the old stereotypes and reaching a more diverse audience than ever. So who is this listener? Well, they tend to be educated and affluent, but look at the behavior. This is the really interesting part. They almost always listen alone, which creates the super intimate connection, and a huge majority, nearly three-quarters, are turning in specifically to learn something new. This isn't passive background noise, it's an active, engaged, and intentional audience. And when you have an audience that valuable, you can bet there's going to be a fierce battle to capture their attention. So this section is all about the tech giants fighting for control of your ears. The results of that war, well, they might surprise you. We all think of Spotify and Apple as the kings of podcasting, right? But it turns out YouTube has actually become the #1 destination for weekly podcast listeners in the US. That signals a huge shift in how people are consuming what used to be an audio-only media. So how are these major players making their money? Well, they've got totally different playbooks. Spotify is trying to build a whole walled garden. They are buying exclusive shows, building a huge ad network, and controlling the experience from start to finish. Apple, on the other hand, is acting more like an app store. They just take a cut of the subscriptions that creators sell directly to their listeners. Okay, so that's the big picture. But how does all of this trickle down to the individual creators, the ones who aren't named Joe Rogan? How do they actually make a living? It turns out they have a pretty diverse toolbox of revenue streams. These are pretty much the four main ways podcasters get paid. You've got direct sponsorships from brands, direct support from your audience through things like Patreon, those automated ads that just get placed in your show, and affiliate sales, where you get a commission. The key here is that most successful creators, they don't rely on just one. So let's look at a newer creator, someone with about 1,000 downloads per episode. With a smaller audience, those big money sponsors just aren't calling yet. So notice where the money is coming from. It's almost entirely from their direct relationship with the audience selling their own products, like courses or getting donations from fans. But now watch what happens when that show grows at 10,000 downloads an episode. The whole revenue mix completely flips on its head. Suddenly, ads and sponsorships become the single biggest driver of income. The entire business model changes as the audience gets bigger. Alright, for our final section, let's look ahead at the powerful trends that are reshaping this industry right now. Because the future of audio is getting a lot more visual, a lot more global, and it's getting a ton of help from AI. The visual revolution is real, and it is not a small trend. An incredible 42% of weekly listeners now say they prefer to watch their podcasts. Think about that. This isn't just a niche thing, it's a fundamental shift in how people want to consume content. And it explains exactly why YouTube is crushing the platform race. We are also seeing a big shift in what people want to listen to. For the second year in a row now, comedy and sports have brought in more ad revenue than news, and that suggests that listeners are increasingly turning to podcasts for entertainment and, just a bit of escapism. And behind the scenes, AI is basically becoming this invisible co-producer for thousands of shows. More than half of all creators are using it for things like editing and transcription. And get this, the audiences are totally fine with it. This tech is making it way cheaper and easier to produce high-quality shows. And finally, the center of the podcasting universe is shifting. While the US still has the most listeners overall, the most engaged weekly listeners, the real superfans, are now in emerging markets like South Africa and Indonesia. The future of audience growth is truly global. So all of this leaves us with one last kind of provocative question. Podcasting was once called the new radio, but as it becomes something you watch, something that's co-produced by an AI, and something that's consumed by a massive global audience, what does that old definition of radio even mean anymore? The lines are blurring, and this evolution, well, it is far from over.